Welcome to this interview series. My name is Christina Theodoraki. I'm editor of Small Business Economics and Entrepreneurship Journal, and I have the great honor to interview today Alfredo De Massis, who is professor of entrepreneurship and family business and director of the Center of the Family Business Management at the Free University of Bolzano. He also co-directs several family business research projects at the IMD and Lancaster University Management School at the UK. In 2025, Family Capital ranked Alfredo as the world's top 25 star professors for family business. Alfredo also serves as associate editor of Family Business Review, and he is part of the editorial board of Entrepreneurship Theory and Practice, Strategic Entrepreneurship Journal, and Journal of Family Business Strategy, but also several other journals. So welcome, Alfredo, and thank you very much for joining us for this interview series.
Thank you very much, Christina, for this nice introduction. It's a pleasure to be here and to share with you and with the stakeholders of small business economics some, experience, ideas, and thoughts about family business research.
Thank you for joining us. So Alfredo has just published a very recent article in Small Business Economics. The article has been published in August 2022. The article is entitled "The Open Family Firm: Openness as Boundary Work in Family Enterprises." This article is co-authored with Frank Lambrechts from Hasselt University in Belgium, and Jolien Huybrechts from Maastricht University in the Netherlands. It's also co-authored with Erik Lehmann from University of Augsburg in Germany. The article contributes also to your recognition as one of the intellectual thought leaders on the family business scholarly discussion. So, Alfredo, I would like to start my first question. Can you please explain us and define us what is a family business for you?
Thank you very much for this very challenging question. No, I'm joking. Of course, there are many definitions that have been applied by academics that, as we both know, can be very creative. In 2012, actually, I wrote with some other colleagues a review and an annotated bibliography of family business studies, and the first 30, 40 pages were entirely dedicated to the definitions of family firms. Let's, put it simple. I believe that a family business is a business where you have a family that, on the one hand, has the ability to influence the vision of the business, and at the same time has also the willingness to transfer this business across generations. This ability and this willingness are two important ingredients that are required in order to produce the unique and distinctive behavior that characterizes family enterprises.
Thank you very much for this clear definition. And can you tell us how your journey on this topic started, when and how?
Thank you. Well, it started actually at the second year of my PhD, because I actually started my PhD with the different topics, but it was a time when, more and more in Italy and Europe, we were reading about, business dynasties suffering from succession issues. In Italy, there were at the time many scandals, many problems. All the time I was reading the newspapers in the morning, and I found, that there was some unique problem that characterized a family in business. And so actually, I had started my PhD on different topics, and the challenge from there on was to convince my supervisor at the time to change topic. And basically, I started doing research in family business because I saw that it was so much relevant from the practice side. And also, as I started going through the academic reading, I also saw that was really an emerging field where there were some important seminal studies, but I perceived that there was a huge amount of things that could be done. And so that was fundamentally my intuition. And I followed, my passion for that, and I decided to do so. And a Saturday morning, I decided to write an email to one of the pioneers in the field, who is Professor Chua, and I asked him, I've just decided to do research in family business. Would you be happy if I come visit you? And he responded in real time, asking why. I responded in real time, outlining some reasons behind this, and he said, okay, come. And that's where the real journey started in Canada.
We are very, very happy you followed your passion and this moment that started the journey of family business. Can you tell us how is your research evolved from this very early beginning spot, the beginning of the journey, until today that you are widely recognized as one of the most important voices in family business?
Thank you. Yes, of course, I mean, it was very tough at the beginning because I was entering a very interdisciplinary and completely new field. By the time I had, my background was actually, I was trained as an engineer, although I was very passionate about, psychology, sociology, and other stuff. And I think, what was very useful actually in my career development, in my academic career, was the experience that I had done after my PhD and before starting my academic career in strategy and management consulting. Indeed, if I look back now at some of the most highly cited papers that I've been producing, I would say that the most cited ones are those where the research questions were really, inspired and stimulated by conversations with practitioners, which is a sort of, let's say, personal challenge that I try to, to continue, because one of my important goals, let's say, as I consider the professor, let's say, job in a pretty holistic way, is to try to be very rigorous academically, but at the same time also very impactful on practice. And this is why, for those who have read some of my papers, I have a kind of broad range of methodologies that apply, but most of my work is work that I conduct working with family business leaders and family enterprises.
Excellent. Talking about citations and impact, which of your articles, you have published several articles, you have been associated in books, in theories. So which of your articles, book or theories is your most favorite and why?
Well, that's I had never thought about it. I think I'm particularly, I think that we're kind of expiring my articles on the stream of innovation through tradition. These are a set of articles that try to advance this new idea that actually, the past and the future are not necessarily two opposing things, as most of the innovation management literature has been kind of, telling us, right? Because if you read the innovation management handbooks, the key message for managers and leaders is, if you want to make the way for the new, just dismiss the past, forget the past, because the past is a source of inertia, is a source of, is a sort of barrier of resistance, etc. Actually, these works that, started by interacting with exemplary family firms that were at the same time very strongly, anchored to their past and, very much recognized as champions in innovation, show that you can reconcile the two and that you can actually leverage your past in order to innovate. One of the most highly cited ones is an old article published in 2008, which is a review on the different literature from different fields on innovation, on family business succession. I'm also very much, I really keep at heart succession as a topic, because this is still the most debated topics and continue to be an important issues that unfortunately in many institutions, at least in those institutional countries where I had the pleasure and the privilege to work, is typically treated in a pretty technical way. I was writing an article in the most famous Italian newspaper, financial newspaper, about succession, and my point was we should stop looking at succession just from a technical viewpoint. because we are only looking at the tip of the iceberg. The reason why most successions don't happen or don't happen as they should is because there are some soft aspects that are clearly overlooked. And so, these are some articles that I'm very emotionally attached to.
Great. And coming to the article you published in Small Business Economics, you talk about the open family firm. What is the openness and the boundary for family enterprise?
Thanks for another interesting question. Openness, we could define openness as opening up organizational boundaries in collaborating with external actors. And so, if we apply this concept of openness to the family business setting, basically we start seeing family businesses as a source of evolving ecosystem. I mean, families, again, they have to be open, because in the current world, you cannot do anything without being open. And sometimes, family businesses so have to be open with the external environment. But if we, move from the traditional view of the family business, so the family firm, to a more, let's say, innovative but also realistic view of what I call the family-related organizational ecosystem, which is that ecosystem made of family firms, made of family offices, made of investment companies, made of family foundations, made of, family academies, that families in business or entrepreneurial families create in order to administer these assets. So if you speak with an entrepreneurial families, of course, the operational businesses are very important, and some of them are involved in more than one of these operational businesses. But we can't deny that actually there are a number of other entities that are still very important to maintain, to create and preserve value and or wealth, different types of wealth actually, across generations. So foundations can become strategically important. And so, and families must be open, because there are flows of resources, flows of people, family and non-family members across these organizations. And so the notion of openness, it's really very important, and it's really very timely.
Great. Can you tell us more about the paradox, or even if there is any challenges related to family business, or probably some elements that they can weakness their openness of the family business?
Thank you. Well, if you look at some of my research on family business innovation, some of my published studies have been arguing for what I and some other colleagues, my co-authors, call the ability and willingness paradox of family firm innovation. So family businesses, those organizations that are defined as I briefly illustrated a few minutes ago, for a number of reasons, are better able to innovate, yet less willing to do so. And so very often they get stuck. They are better able because, as we outline in a paper, specifically focusing on this paradox, for instance, families are very powerful typically within the organization. They typically have, majority stakes. They are the powerful internal stakeholders who can really, impose their decisions, influence the vision of the business at least. Family members speak the same language, they can act quickly. So there are a number of theoretical reasons why they are characterized by a higher ability. Yet they have a lower willingness, because when you look at the willingness, which is more related to things like, the disposition, the intention, the goals of family members, very often innovation is something that scares, especially the senior generation, which is the generation of those who have, in many cases, founded something which became big, and now they, of course, are afraid of protecting what they have created. However, on the other hand, you have the young generation. That is the generation of those who, for a number of reasons, are really very much inclined to bring change within the family enterprise. And sometimes they get stuck. So this is a typical paradox. of course, together with the paradox of tradition and innovation, which is somehow related to this, right? That tradition is so much of a value, but some of them see this as a paradox, as paradoxical, the fact that if you invest too much in tradition, you innovate less. Actually, a paradox that most of my studies, I told you, kind of question or challenge. If we come to openness, of course, again, openness is very important in the current environment where being open, collaborating becomes, almost something that every company basically does, becomes very important. Yet we can't forget that families are also afraid of being too open or of being open, because when you open up too much your company to outsiders, there is a huge risk of threatening the family owner's social-emotional wealth, because you are bringing in somehow through some kind of relationship an outsider, and this linkage, brings to the perception of family owners, saying, okay, but now we have not anymore the will or the right to do what we want, because at least we will have to negotiate with someone else. So again, that can be read in a paradoxical way as well.
Thank you for explaining us all these paradox and challenges related to family business. I would like to ask you, what is the next steps? Where do you think the future of family business research is going? Do you have any ongoing reflections? What do you think will be the next topics that will be challenging research and practitioners, but also family business?
Thank you. Thank you for asking another difficult question. Well, I think, first of all, one important switch in the current view, and so a very promising area for future research, is this change in perspective from the family business to the entrepreneurial families. If we look at the entrepreneurial families rather than the family business, we see that the spectrum of possible issues and challenges broadens a lot. Because this means start studying and understanding, that a family, for instance, an entrepreneurial family might be happy to sell a business if starts another business, right, with a portfolio logic. Because, other entities, as I said, like family investment companies, family offices, family academies, can be used in a strategic way to fulfill some sort of goals. For instance, we know that many entrepreneurial families establish family foundations or family business foundations to advance social entrepreneurship, goals or social goals. Or things like this. So this change in perspective is one important thing. And of course, there is a scarcity of research on that. Another important direction for future research also relates to the fact that the family business field has so far been dominated by a management or governance perspective. What does it mean? It means that we as scholars have been putting most of our efforts into trying to produce research that helps family businesses to be better managed and or better governed. Now, this crisis, like the COVID-19 crisis, the following war that we are still living, have created a sort of new scenario. And in this new scenario, actually, I've been talking a lot with many family owners and family business leaders, and more, they start speaking about ownership issues. So bringing in an ownership perspective, besides the management and the governance one, becomes very important. And when I say ownership issues, it means that if you start, many of them are, for instance, worried about not destroying their wealth, what they own. So, starting doing research from a wealth perspective, we have been almost assuming that, entrepreneurial families had some wealth, and now we had to help them to, manage in the best possible ways their organization, or govern in the best possible ways their organization. But now, if you question the wealth, what you own, it means that you have to start taking a look at a number of ownership issues. So, not only the goals of family owners that might be different from those of managers, but also, things like if you are an owner, how can you best administer the financial wealth and the social-emotional wealth and the human capital, which I also consider a type of wealth of family enterprises across generations. So a number of issues bring in. A third, the promising direction for future research also relates to goals. And is again something that I believe is related to the current situation, because I think that, traditionally family business research has been saying, okay, in family firms, you have family-centered non-economic goals, and these family-centered non-economic goals coexist with economic ones and shape the behavior of this organization, which is true, definitely true, and proved by many studies. Now, in the current scenario, we had, I think, family business leaders are exposed to new trade-offs. Because, for instance, if you think about the COVID-19 crisis, there was a trade-off between life and livelihood, between, there are new sort of trade-off. Many family enterprises have started doing donations to society or things like this. So there are some society-oriented centered goals besides the family-centered ones. And so I think that understanding this higher complexity in the goal system of family business owners is also something very promising that very likely will also lead to reconsider much of the research on family firm performance, because we as scholars, I include myself in the list, have been doing studies on family versus non-family firm performance using different types of indicators, but most of this research is not useful because performance depends on goals, and success is the achievement of goals. And so if you don't consider or take into account the complexity of such goal systems, you cannot basically say much. Also, from a methodological perspective, I think there is room for, promising new research directions, because, for instance, we know that, the family business field is a field that has been dominated by regression-based research, let's say, some multiple case studies, not always applied in a very inductive way, but that's a different consideration. But I think that since this is a context where emotions are so vivid and play so much an important role, there is a wide spectrum, there is a lot of room for new methods that are, for instance, better capable of capturing the emotions of the individuals within the family firm. I also believe there is a strong need of understanding the micro foundations of the behaviors within or the psychological foundations of the behavior within the family firm, because in my view, we have been too much at a macro level very often, and especially in a multi-system context like family firms. It's very important to understand, to go more in depth to the root cause, and the micro-foundational lens can be very important. I also strongly believe that qualitative research is underutilized in the family business field, and there is more room to conduct different types of inductive studies aimed to explore, for instance, the processes. In the past, I had written another article for Small Business Economics where the title was From What to How, and it was a sort of call for, let's say, starting to explore the how, the processes, in that case, actually the execution, how you execute things. We started from the assumption that in most family business literature, people believe that once a strategy is defined, execution follows. But this is not always the case. Sometimes you have very good strategies, very well-defined strategies, but very poorly executed ones. And so we were, let's say, stimulating or encouraging scholars to focus more on the execution, and focusing on the execution very often means employing qualitative methods, because you need that sort of richness and that sort of in-depth insights in order to really go, through that. These are some of the ideas. Of course, I have also many more, but I don't want to take too much time.
Thank you very much, Alfredo, for sharing with us all these generous, important, and promising research directions. And we hope that we will see some of this research publishing in top journals in entrepreneurship. Coming to the end of this interview, I would like to ask you from your journey, what are the advices you may have to give to a young scholar that start their research journey on family business? And do you have any reflections or thoughts from your own research journey or insights that you can share and help young researchers on this topic?
Thank you, Christina. Yes, I think one of the pieces of advice that I typically give to my PhD students is to read different literature. So if you have the ambition to become a family business scholar, in my view, you shouldn't read just the family business literature. You should read, different literature. For instance, the family science literature, there are some journals in family science where they really go much more in details in terms of examining family dynamics and things that might shape, family firm behavior. And so, bringing back other literature can be important. Also, I encourage them to read the literature in psychology, in sociology. Let's not forget that some of the, let's say, most useful family business concepts in our field, for instance, the social-emotional wealth notion, are concepts that have been actually, brought from other literature and have been applied to our field. So really, reading and being exposed to different literature, different theories is something very important. The second piece of advice refers to the sort of, to the closeness with the world of practice. Of course, if you are a scholar, you need to, in my view, to have the ambition to publish in the leading, journals in your field and beyond. And so you need to be very rigorous. You need to put lots of hours of, investment into being trained with methods, reading a lot, etc. But it's also, in my view, very important to keep a strong link with practice, because I think in the long run, this pays off. Because if you are to some extent involved with practitioner, and this can happen in different ways, you have a much more in-depth understanding of what's going on and what's happening. So this is another thing that I try to also facilitate with the young scholars who are working with me. Working with practice may mean being involved from time to time, of course, not too much, but in some advisory or consultancy projects with practitioners, but also means to be involved in what we call the third mission of university. So more outreach activities that I see very often instrumental, to my knowledge advancement agenda. So basically to my research in the end. Related to this, I think another good piece of advice is to also realize that, of course, for careers, you need academic publications in good journals, but also as family business and I would say entrepreneurship scholars, it's also very important to be ambidextrous in the way we design our career, so as to combine, academic publications with, more practice-oriented publications, journal articles as a type of research output, but also being aware that this is not the only output. And so, with video, with, other different sources of output. So after all, I think that what will pay off is also this sort of ambidexterity and not really being just, very narrowly focused only on a type of output, because I think that the world is shifting into that sort of direction. So these are, some important things. Then, of course, as any profession, let's call it this way, of course, also being a scholar means putting a lot of effort and also a lot of perseverance, because we cannot deny that the quality barriers at journals are increasing. And I see this also from my editor's perspective, you know, in Entrepreneurship Theory and Practice or Family Business Review. You know, the quality is increasingly higher and higher. And so, you know, this means that there is, it's very difficult nowadays to have a very, you know, well-done study, a sound study. There is no perfect study. Every study has limitation, but there are studies that at least are sounder than others. So, you know, putting a lot of efforts, which means reading a lot, interacting a lot with the scholars in your field and in other fields, trying to grow out of this, through this exchange of ideas.
Thank you very much, Alfredo, for sharing these inspiring insights and advices with the research community today. I really enjoyed our discussion, and I encourage our readers and fellows to read and download your paper, which is in open access, so it can be freely downloaded from the Springer's website, but also your all contributions on the research community. Thank you again for being with us today.
Thank you very much, Christina. Yes, it would be very good if a scholar could read our paper titled The Open Family Firms, Openness as Boundary Work in Family Enterprises, especially because I'm quite curious and I would be quite happy to receive comments, of course, criticism and whatever, you know, regarding this study that I put together with my colleagues, Frank Lambrechts, as you said, Jolien Huybrechts and Erik Lehmann, and that to some extent was created with the goal of starting a new sort of conversation. So thank you very much, and thank you so much for your time during this interview.